I think this is an interesting time because even those of us who would describe ourselves as optimistic, glass half full people are being challenged in our beliefs.
It's really exposed every weakness, no matter how small, no matter how large, how systemic, how minor, how individual.
And we were really the first urban area, the first downtown in the United States to feel the economic effects. So there was really nowhere else to turn to sort of understand what we could expect as we started to shut down and lock down way back in early March. So the effects have been really devastating.
I have probably 25 ground floor businesses, so customer facing businesses that have been impacted, are in categories that have been impacted by the government mandated shutdowns and also just the lack of foot traffic and customer activity. Over half of my ground floor businesses are owned by or co-owned by people of color or women or LGBTQ members of the community or, all of the above.
Across our city, we've already seen more than 200 small businesses announce their permanent closure, more than 140 in downtown alone. And these are restaurants and retailers, many that have been around for decades.
It is so hard to be a small business owner at the best of times that it is painful to watch them have to deal with really what feels like the worst of times. Now, of course, this impacts me as well as a landlord because I have mortgages on these properties. And so the only way that I am able to provide rent relief to my tenants, and I've been fortunate that I've been able to do so, has been specifically by asking for mortgage relief from my lenders. That has only been possible, I think, because my banks are also local or regional banks. There are thousands of small landlords out there who are not as fortunate with their banking relationships. And I wish policymakers would work with banks to address that problem.
The data we're seeing, people talking about inequities and oppression within systems, that's not news. For many of us, that's been what we've dealt with our entire lives. What is good is there are folks who have not had to wake up and go to sleep aware and thinking about that, who are now aware and thinking about it and wanting to champion work.
And I would argue it affects everybody. It really does. And I feel like there was a moment where we all understood that. And I'm worried we're going to lose that moment again.
The roots of racial injustice exacerbate and further the unemployment rates, but also are really key elements to the climate crisis and the climate injustice.
We have to do the hard work of addressing systemic racism, of addressing needed police reform, of ensuring that we don't go backwards on community safety, of ensuring that we're making a difference for those that are out on the street.
We have something like 11,000 unsheltered folks in King County right now, I think. We all have to take responsibility. I am appalled by how people really just don't want to have to see the problem. Again, it comes down to you have to want to be part of the solution.
Education in the state of Washington is not on a continuum. Early learning is separate from K-12. K-12 is separate from higher education. Higher education is separate from employers. And so connecting all three of those, when you look at early learning, that's when that important development starts. But early learning is also important to employers because those are the folks that provide the childcare that employers need so that their employees can be present and productive. So I wave my magic wand and build this continuum that goes all the way through education, all the way through to being able to have equitable employment process, to equitable advancement and promotion.
We are a state-funded agency. When the state is collecting less revenue because of the way the economy has been impacted, then we are allocated less money, and that's what we're dealing with now.
I'm extremely concerned about climate change, but I'm going to first and foremost say that I think that if I think about myself in the context of Washington State, which is the state where I live and the state that I love, it's about taxation. I don't want to see another survey that shows that we are 49th out of 50 states in per capita education spending. I don't want to see another chart that shows we're 47th out of 50 in mental health spending. I don't want to see another newspaper story about how we have the most regressive tax system, meaning that our poorest people are paying the vast majority of our taxes. I expect more out of the community, the portion of the community that can afford to pay more. So I just think that we can do better as a state on that front, and that would be hugely impactful for all of the other things that we are trying to deal with. It's hard to talk about climate change if people don't have jobs.
I think this pandemic, both within our own city and region, and certainly around the country, has really shone a bright light on the inequities within our community and in our country, and it has widened them. And it has reminded us of the significant amount of work we have to do.
I don't know that I'm looking for us to be the national leader. I'm looking for us to fix our issues right here at home. And then if people see something as we gain some traction, and if people see that, oh, that's working in Seattle, let's try it in Spokane, let's try it in Chicago, let's try it in DC.
In many cases, we know exactly what change needs to be made. And so that sense of urgency and that sense that we can't afford to wait anymore really is my big lesson from this year.
I'm holding on to hope. I have seen the state of Washington, all of the regions really figure out how we come together as community. I have seen cross-sector collaboration in a way that I have not seen in multiple decades of my career. And that part gives me hope as education and state agencies and business and nonprofit and families figure out how we serve each other and keep our community stronger. How do we keep businesses open? How do we keep small businesses open? And so I have hope watching people set tables that I haven't seen before.
Engaging with more leaders in the community outside of the business community and outside of downtown. I think one of the challenges, one of the things this pandemic has highlighted.
I think that whether it's a financial decision or recommendation, educational, governmental, economic, employment related, any of these decisions fundamentally should be advancing justice instead of seeing racial equity as an additional and separate effort.
How do we rebuild better? Both in downtown, but really across our city, and really address the needs of marginalized communities, particularly the Black community in Seattle.
Who's gathered? Who gets to be at the table? Oftentimes there's the same few who get to gather because they have power and influence. And we need to have a pretty diverse table. Everybody knows how to build a network. We do it all the time. What I'm asking is you build a network of people that are different from you and that bring a different perspective, because the Black, brown, indigenous folks who've not necessarily been a part of certain tables are being invited to those tables because of the recognition of that. But the how will matter. How you invite and how you execute, as I mentioned before, matters. That you really need to include people at the beginning.
Cities are important for so many reasons. One of them being it is how we combat climate change, by living, working, playing, enjoying arts and culture close to one another.
So if I could change anything that I think could have impact on everything, I think it might be that I would eliminate fear as a factor in decision making.
I'd say to everybody out there to stop the scarcity mentality. Our country and our state is resource rich. Let's think about how we allocate those resources to help one another.
This year has taught us that we are absolutely capable of changing, of evolving in short order